Hello everyone, my name is Randy Gilbert and I'd like to welcome you to this edition of Capitol Update. Today's a special edition for us, as with us we have Senator Gen Olson, a 30-year sitting senator, and it will be her last show on the Capitol Update. So Jen, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
Jen, it's our honor. Today I thought we would start the show off a little bit talking about the session that we had when we had you on the last time, you and Representative Depke. We were talking about the session and what was going on, and that was just when it was getting started. And now here we are 2 months after the fact, and I thought you could take some time and, in your perspective, wrap up what happened during the session.
Well, it was a session that I think everybody was anxious to have close early because redistricting was occurring. There would be new legislative districts and people would want to find out whether they were running and what the circumstances would be and get started with campaigning. And so there was kind of an underlying goal of trying to finish early, and certainly not to resolve things and reach closure so that we didn't have to go down the route of the previous year that led to a government shutdown and having to deal with those kinds of issues. And to that extent, it was successful. They didn't quite reach the goal as to end as early as possible, but we ended a week or so ahead of the normal constitutional deadline. So it was nice to be finished a bit early. Usually I spend my birthday over there like all 24 hours because it's right at that constitutional end, but I was able to have that on my own.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and happy birthday, by the way. You know, let me ask you this question because you just brought it up, seeing that you were not worried about running again. Was this session any different for you than the previous, 14, I guess, when you think about ours?
Well, it allowed me, I don't know that it's changed because I haven't, it hasn't been my style to look at everything I do as to what the impact is going to be on my, elected future. I believe that that one needs to serve well, and I think pursue the focus of issues that you believe are in the best interest not only of your constituents but of the state, and I think that can serve one well. And I was able to keep my focus there. I'd been through some health challenges the previous year or just between the sessions, and so I didn't want to run myself into the ground again with stress, but so I kept my focus on what we needed to complete with the education, particularly education issues. And we were successful. People say we should finish the education bill first. Now, this wasn't a budget year, but we did get our education bill done first. And for the first time in in most people's memory, on the floor of the Senate, we had a unanimous yes vote on that bill. And there was a standing ovation for that.
Yeah.
And and I made the decision that we wanted to work with the governor and say that we've got issues that are putting together. We're going to have to combine them all. We've been sending individual bills, but that we want to work with him in determining what things are very important to them, as well as ones that were just deal breakers. And let's just get it down to try to convince one another, and then go on from there. And so we ended up with an agreed upon bill that the governor was supporting, and we knew that he would sign.
So education is, in the late part of your career, has been very important. Is there any highlights of that bonding bill that went through that you're very pleased with?
Well, the bonding bill was different than the education bill,
Right.
but can I speak about the education bill first?
Yes.
Yes, there was. We had achieved some what to me were very important issues the prior year, and that was the working for the reading, the early literacy, and children being able to read proficiently by 3rd grade. And that's been on the governor's agenda and their 7-point plan. We had building on the successes and what we knew worked. We had 3 provisions in that bill, both a local literacy plan that made them eligible for a literacy incentive aid, which is the first time in the country that we've had a funding stream was provided for success of reaching 3rd grade proficiency on the one hand, or gaining more than a year of growth. So it affected different kinds of schools, and that was a new thing. Otherwise, we usually just hand money out for various circumstances, and do good things with it. And it has not shown in some of the results that we need and must strive for, like closing the achievement gap. And then the third one was that we tripled the money that went into the Minnesota Reading Corps, which is a Made in Minnesota model that is now looked at all across the country, and it looked at being replicated. That is a very intentional preparation of the ones who are going into the AmeriCorps program. It's a volunteer, but they do get a stipend if they complete 11 months of it, and it's been very, very successful. In fact, some early research in Minneapolis showed that it was cutting down the number of children that had to go into special ed.
Well, how about that?
With a very, very carefully controlled study, it was 1/3 of the number of those who had not participated in the program that actually had to go on for some special education. And that saves money that can be used in other ways, and removes that challenge for young people. They can start sailing
Right.
through the regular program. So that was our success of the first year. This year, we built on some of the things we wanted to do with the career and tech education, because there's been a void as we've placed more and more focus on higher academic standards. Not all young people function well in that kind of a model of learning, and need some hands-on learning, need to understand why these math processes are important, and we've lost a lot of our career tech programs. We had a windfall, if you will, of information that came from the department about the success, the impact of a career and tech program on young people's lives in high school. If they've taken over, I think, 250 hours, which is probably 2 to 3 semesters of a program in a career tech area, their graduation rate, and this was a study that was from data in 2011 that has been accumulated over a number of years, 97.12% graduation rate.
Really?
And that carried through to minority groups, all kinds of categories that was in the 90s. And it was, so if they have that experience, it means they're finishing high school. They're getting their academic subjects that they need, but they have a relevant hands-on experience that helps to reinforce that. And one of the other new initiatives that we got through this year was opening the doors of post-secondary enrollment options for taking a career and tech course for exploration purposes in the 10th grade.
Okay.
And if they're successful there, and we're working with MnSCOOT to try to look beyond having the highest in the class coming on, because we're trying to inspire them to stay in school.
Sure.
And we've got dropout rates that we're trying to turn around, and we want people college and career ready, and we feel this is an important tool. And so we're working now, even though session has ended, to be sure that young people know about this, that the colleges are set up to open the doors to these students, and that our high schools are cooperating with it, because it's going to help them stay in school.
Sure.
So everybody benefits.
So that's on the education bill.
That's on the education bill.
And then bonding. And bonding, we could talk a long time about this. And by the way, I don't want to just skip over the education,
No,
because I
that's
think
right.
that's absolutely wonderful piece of legislature that you helped get passed, and
Yes.
hopefully we'll have a foundation for our whole youth coming forward. But on the bonding bill, what didn't you like, what did you like that occurred?
Well, the bonding bill was mainly an argument of how big it should be between the House and the Senate and the governor. And I think essentially the Senate position prevailed. That was closer to the governor than what the House position was, spending a bit more, but focusing it on the infrastructure needs that were of regional or state significance, and what they call HEPRA, which is the asset preservation of our existing features. We tried to avoid a lot of the local kinds of projects, but there was a little bit of give and take there, and we accommodated some of the governor's high priorities, and ended up with a bill that, we've got very, very low interest rates now, and so felt that it was not unreasonable to pass that bill. It had bipartisan support and bipartisan opposition, as everything can do, but nonetheless it was an achievement to complete that, because this is the bonding year.
Sure. Something that I want to touch on very quickly, and then we'll move into our next session here, was that when we had you and Representative Depke on the last time, as we were prepping up for the show, we were talking about the Viking Stadium, and it was a very low priority. It seemed going into the session that it was very unlikely that anything would happen, and yet here we sit after session and we have a new Viking Stadium going on. Can you wrap that up quickly?
It was a low priority depending on, I guess, who you talk to.
Right.
You know, some of us aren't big sports fans, and you know, that wouldn't be a priority for where we would want to spend money. And yet there's some feeling that's the route that has been gone for the other sports, and kind of the Vikings were at the last on the list, and yet a very valuable asset and popular among our citizens. And but trying to get a proposal, you know, there was, I think if you followed the media, you'd think that was the only thing that was being dealt with, but that clearly wasn't the case. And there wasn't any action on, and even at committee or certainly by the full legislative bodies, until you have an actual proposal to review and discuss and possibly amend or to vote on. And that didn't happen or materialize until within the last week or so, and that's probably what kept the session going a bit longer.
Sure.
But I had, and I've not been a fan. I was not a supporter of the Twins one that put a sales tax on, additional sales tax on the citizens of Hennepin County, who had really no choice in the matter. And it was a local option tax that in the statute requires a referendum, and they bypassed the referendum. This time they did work around that. I said, if you ever think you're going to get a vote for me, it's going to have to be something that is a matter of choice for people. And that's where they came up with the moving a proposal that there's been efforts to move from paper pull tabs to electronic ones, and they believe that there was expanded use of that would occur and would generate the projections where it would generate the resources that would pay off the bonds for the stadium. And that's a matter of choice. People don't have to buy pull tabs if they don't want to.
Right.
And if they want to support the charity, they can write a check directly to the charity rather than playing the game. And the fallback, you know, I was concerned about that as well. Well, the fallback is if that doesn't generate enough revenue, came to adding a surcharge on the suites. The charge that people buy, there was quite 150, I think, suites in this new stadium, that they'd pay a bit more in order to keep up the payments there on on those bonds. They also, I think, designated that what would kick in is one specialized Vikings lottery game. And there might have been something linked with some parking too, but there was several options that were directly tied to users and freedom of choice in terms of those that would end up making the contribution for that bond repayment. The other thing was that I think a lot of people don't understand. The bonds that are going to be used that are in that bill are not general revenue bonds that have the backing of the full faith and credit of the state. In fact, it specifically says that they are, you know, it's appropriation bonds that are being used, and they cost a little bit more interest because the people who buy them, those bonds, or invest in those bonds, are taking a greater risk.
Sure.
Because it clearly says they are not backed by the full faith and credit of the state. And so it will be dependent on if, you know, the stadium will be built, and if they aren't being able to meet it, the bondholders are actually having some greader risk there.
Okay. Well, hey, Jen.
And so I did support at the end, and an awful lot of people from our district, you know, whether they were, regardless of their party and their persuasion, felt that this was an asset that needed to be supported, and so I did vote for it.
Okay. Well, we're going to go to break, and when we come back, I want to reflect on your 30 years. And as we go to break, I just want to point out that you've served under 5 different governors in your break, 30 years from 1983 when you were sworn in until when you finish up this year. And I do want to put out right now, and I think we should talk about it, because I think people have forgotten that when Jesse Ventura was governor, you ran with Norm Coleman as lieutenant governor at that time.
Yeah.
So with that, let's go to the break, and we'll be back in a moment to reflect on Jen's 30 years at the Senate. Well, welcome back. As we went to break, we were reflecting on the fact that Senator Olson has been a sitting senator for over 30 years and has served under 5 different governors. One thing that I find to be very interesting over your 30 years in the 5 governors is that you have been the only senator to sit on the governor's residence board, which I think is pretty amazing, and some people might not think that's a big deal, but we've had 2 Democratic governors, 1 independent, and 2 Republicans, and you've made it through the shift and change, the ebbs and flows of government. Do you want to reflect a little bit on that and on your career, obviously?
Well, thank you. Well, the Governor's Residence Council was established back in Governor Quee's time in order to kind of take the politics out of things that needed to be done at the governor's residence. And it's been a very interesting role to play and to bring some institutional memory as the time has progressed, and to observe how the governors in their different personalities and styles and their families have how they regard the residence, how they wish to use it and put their personal touches on it, and yet we're charged with assuring that its historical integrity is retained, and that we pursue and work with the Department of Administration in ensuring that the livability of it as well as the accessibility for the public, because it is the people's house. And so that has been a very interesting one, and I began with Governor Perpich, and we had the excitement at that time. At one point, somebody had made some statement of criticism of him, and they came back from a trip and said that they were going to sell the residence. And of course, that caught some attention. It really wasn't theirs to sell.
Right.
And so we got past that hurdle. But it's, it started with Perpich, and then Governor Carlson, and then Governor Ventura, and I know they brought in somebody to do some decorating that really was outside of the realm of what really should have been approved with the Residence Council. Right. But we got through that particular incident, and then Governor Pawlenty for the time that he was there, and now Governor Dayton. And Governor Dayton has brought some new challenges because he has 2 dogs. Yes. And that has required some adjustments, and accommodating the dogs in the yard and protecting them. But all of them have been very, very supportive. In fact, Governor Dayton expressed concern that where was I going to be able to continue beyond that time, because I'd said that when his term began that, well, if I get reappointed, you will be the 5th governor I've served under. Well, he said, what does that take? Well, I said, the majority leader appoints me. She happened to be coming in for the breakfast that day, right behind me, and he turned and he said, well, you reappoint her.
And it was
and
done.
now he said, well, now can you stay on the Governor's Residence Council? And I said, well, not really, because I won't be a senator after the end of the year, but I said I'd have to be appointed as a public member. We said, oh, well, maybe we can see about that, because He controls the appointment of the public members. I don't know whether that will happen or not, but it has been an honor and a pleasure to work with a wide variety of people who are committed to the preservation of this important asset, and to have a comfortable place for the governor and his family to be.
Sure. Well, it's amazing when you think about how you've just reflected on this one position that you've held for 30 years. 30 years, Jen. You and I talked about this at break, and I should step back here and make this comment that I don't know how many people realize that you're not running again. We speak all the time, and a lot of people in our circles know that you're not running again, but
I made that decision 2 years ago. I said I would run for this 2-year term, and we go in 10-year cycles, 4, 4, and 2 in the Senate. And I made that announcement 2 years ago. Some said, should you be making that? And I said, yes, it's time, I'm ready, but I will serve that 2 years, and of course didn't know that we would be in the majority. And it would be the 2 years out of the 30 that I've served in the majority, and had a gavel, chaired the Education Committee, and had our office in the Capitol rather than the State Office Building. So that brought about some major change. But it is a long time for something I never aspired to do.
Well,
and
it
does amaze me that I have stuck with it that long. I like new challenge, and in my real career in education, I moved through a variety of positions that kept bringing new challenge. And the only thing I can say, I guess, this is constantly changing too. The
Right.
people are different with each election. New people come in, different governors, different issues,
Different economy,
and
different-
the challenges of working through that process and working with people is just never lost. It's invigoration.
Well, it would have to be. And again, you have to be a special breed of person for 28 years, for 30 years, 28 in the minority, 2 in majority.
Yeah.
You know, your move that you had to go through 2 years ago, because I don't think people realize that. When you're in a minority, you sit in one portion, and then when you get the majority, you get different offices. And so you had all the moving. But over 30 years, I'm sure there's been some very high points and some very low points. But do you want to take a moment and reflect on some of the things you're most proud of?
Well, you know, one of the staff members came to me not too long ago and said, you know, you're the only senator that has ever done anything that has affected me personally in a positive way. And he said, you took 20 minutes off my drive time to getting to work over here. And that was because of the effort I put into on I-394 at Penn Avenue. There was a lane that was forced to exit when you could have gone straight ahead. And it didn't compress the traffic and create congestion there. And it took me a while to figure out that was a provision in the law that that was the bugger, and I had to. I talked to the chair of the transportation bill when it came to the floor, and told him what I wanted to do in offering an amendment to remove that barrier, and he agreed. And so I said that I would. I explained what it would do, and that all it would take was paint, and that I would buy the paint.
Yeah.
And that got, you know, that was a kind of a sound bite that got picked up in the media. And interestingly enough, that was the first call I got after that was from then State Auditor Mark Dayton, and said, I know exactly what you're talking about. I live in Minneapolis, but I drive that, and I know what you're talking about. What can I do to help?
Sure.
And so that was our first encounter back then. But it took a while to get that changed, because the neighborhood had kind of lobbied for the restriction of those lanes, and why they wanted a parking lot spewing, you know, exhaust on there, I don't know. But it did take a while, but we did get that accomplished and that whole provision repealed. And so it's allowed for some other modifications along the length of 394 that has helped improve. There's a couple more that need to be done, and I may still continue to agitate for those as well.
You know, it's funny being here when that construction is being done. This was the highway to the future, and how much of that was a step back until that change came through, Jen. So thank you. I do want to reflect on something else as well, on the transportation. When I was mayor of Long Lake and we had transportation issues with a power that you never mess with, and that being the railroad, I was amazed at how a phone call to you got some rail cars brought into town overnight, it seems. So Jen has the power of the pen, and I appreciate that.
That surprised even me. I mean, it wasn't my power, but I just got the word to the governor's people that to who to contact and see if we could get some relief and help, because all the citizens have been inconvenienced by taking an extra closure of bridges and across that, and it had to get done before winter. And they'd sent in 3 carloads of ballast, and you needed 75, you know, for more than one round. And it was amazing that within a day, somehow they said they didn't know if they had enough cars in the system. Well, they found them, and they got them there, and they got the ballast in, and it got done. So
my story is, when you want something done, you call Senator Olson.
Well, you know, people don't realize, I think, they think that all we do is go over there and argue about big issues and you know, vote red or green. But there's much more to what the role of a legislator is, and a lot of that is looking after your constituency and the interaction between whether it's the citizens or local units of government and the bureaucracy and the impact of the laws that have been created. And that I think has probably been one of the challenges that's kept me going, is how to find the way that we can break log jams or train stalls that can get something done. And I've had quite a number of those kinds of successes that you know, for one of our cities, there was a scrap of land that this was very recent, that they needed. that was back in the state's hand, was a remnant of a county ditch, and the DNR needed to raise some money, and they wanted $400,000 for this little scrap of land that was 25 feet wide, and it was a dog leg shape. It could use for nothing, and it's the kind of thing we would have in other times transferred for no consideration.
Right.
And that took a couple of years. I told the city, just hang on, I'm not going to give up on this one.
Sure.
And ultimately, we got it transferred for $1.
Yeah, just as it should
So
be.
instead of $400,000.
Right.
So, those are things that, are not, they're not headlines and they're not those kinds of, but they are, I think, important, and they're in a very important role that one learns the ropes through the system over there and can, in fact, use that on behalf of citizens, and that's very rewarding. If there's anything that was rewarding, that's it.
Well, and I think that statement alone explains why you've been our senator for 30 years. I mean, you understand the bridge that you have to play and the part that you have to play, and it's not just about what Senator Olson wants, it's what the constituents want. And Senator, you've represented us very well. I mean, I haven't lived in the area since '83, but I have been out here since '91, and I've been proud to say that you've been my senator. And when I hear these stories, I sit back and I think, this show should be 3 hours long so we could properly reflect and think about all the things that you have done as a senator. Is there, something that you brought up that I think is very interesting is that you said that you've just been appointed an honorary soil scientist?
Yeah. And, well, nobody likes, because they are looked upon as being frivolous, carrying legislation that creates a state symbol. We've got the blueberry muffin, and that one probably is the closest thing to frivolous that we have. But we have others that are recognized symbols for our state. And I've never carried one until a few years ago when students brought to me and wanted a state sport, and they thought it should be the hockey. And we ultimately did get that passed.
Yes, we did.
And that's a long story that I won't get into. But this year, some people came into my office and said, we are here to see if you would help us get a official state soil. And I thought, I didn't know why they had come to me, but as they were talking about it, and they said, we believe it should be the Lester soil. And, we know about Lester Prairie, I think it's named for that, but it's a very fertile soil, a key to our agricultural economy that comes up through south central Minnesota, and it actually ends in western Hennepin County. And this was the 100th anniversary of the Department of Soil Science at the university and the 40th anniversary of the Organization of Soil Scientists. And they said the Smithsonian is bringing their exhibit to Minnesota in the fall, and they are featuring the Lester for Minnesota, and we think it would be very nice if we could have that be our official state soil. And I said, you probably had no way of knowing that when I was in 4-H many years ago in Hennepin County, we had a soil judging project or event, and I participated in that and was the state champion. And our Hennepin County team was a reserve champion and state champion 2 years in a row. So I understand what you're talking about and what this involves. And so we had fun with it. We were criticized by, one on the outside that said, the most frivolous thing going on there is somebody's going to name a state dirt.
Wow.
And I used that in my argument for amending it onto the ag bill and said that, that they don't understand that soil is really at the heart of our agricultural economy. And we need to understand and appreciate them. There's many different soils, but this one is unique to Minnesota with a little spillover in Iowa. And so we did get it through. It's official, and they were so excited that this came through that they presented me a plaque as an honorary soil scientist.
Okay.
So.
How about that? Well, Jen, we have to wrap up,
Yeah.
and I hate to do this, but you've come full circle, 4-H to senator to getting that soil scientist degree that you've wanted, or badge. But thank you again for being on, and thank you for all your service. I know we haven't seen the last of you. You'll still stay involved, but
Well, I'll always be willing to offer some reflections, because I'm sure I will not be able to turn off my attention to what's happening in some of the issues that are going on. So,
well, thank you, Jen.
You're very welcome, and thank you.
You bet. And that wraps up this edition of Capital Update. I'd like to point out that as we enter into our election cycle, this will be the last Capital Update until our new elected officials are appointed in 2013. We will start a new series at the LMCC which will be election coverage 2012, Meet Your Candidates. So please join us here in the future, and thank you for joining us today.